Hey there, Business for Unicorns podcast listeners. This is Mark, and I'm here to tell you about an awesome free resource on businessforunicorns.com. If you ever find yourself feeling frustrated with your training gym because you know that there are all sorts of things you could work on, but you're not really sure how to prioritize, you don't know what's the most important thing to work on or what order you should be tackling your priorities, well, now is the time to go to businessforunicorns.com, click the button, and fill out our free self-assessment. With the Ultimate Training Gym Owner Report Card, you will gain immediate clarity on just where to be focusing your attention to create more positive impact on your community, to drive more revenue and take home income, and to do it all with less stress and more peace of mind. So go to businessofunicorns.com, click the button, fill out that free self-assessment, and start building a business and life you love today.
Well, hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And today I'm here with my good friend Pete to talk about all kinds of things that you want to hear about. How are you, Pete?
I'm doing very well. How are you today,
I'm so
Michael?
good. It hasn't been just the two of us in a hot minute, so I'm kind of looking forward to this. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I listened to your interview with Luca on a walk last night, and I was a little jealous. I was like, I remember the days where I was treated like an inbound guest, not a member of the team, and it brought me back because you referred to him as a repeat offender, and there was a while there where I was a repeat offender, but now I'm just expected to show up for a pretty significant chunk of these things. So it's good to be back.
Now it's
kind
just
of
your
feeling
job.
a little bit like this time I feel a little bit
like a cherished guest more often.
No, I like feeling like I'm in the hot seat a little bit because I know that what we're going to talk about today is more about me being interrogated and you asking thoughtful questions based on what I have to say than us bouncing ideas off of each other from an experience perspective, because you haven't run a performance training gym like I have for a while.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's a great segue in today's topic, which is, we have more and more folks that are members of Unicorn Society that are working with us in large part because you're on the team now. And one of the areas where Fisher and I just have so much less experience. So I thought, let's record at least a handful of podcasts where we get to pick your brain about some of the topics that are unique to having a sports performance facility. And one of the topics I thought we'd start with today is, and this comes up a lot in conversations with Unicorn Society members, and which is when you do youth athletic training. So you work with young athletes. I know you work with, I think, 12 and older but really any age youth athletes. Your relationship is not just with them. Your relationship was with them and often their parents, depending on their age and how you're engaging with them. And a lot of the questions that come up in my conversations with Unicorn Society members is really, how do you balance those communications, right? How do you think about, when do I communicate with the kid? When do I communicate with the parents? When do I need to communicate both? When do I give the message to the kid to give to the parents? And so I think, just big picture, I'd love to just start with, how do you think about that relationship in all different directions?
This is a big one, and it falls under the category of maybe unique knowledge I didn't realize I had after having run this for a while. But when I take inventory of all of these relationships that we balance with our clients, you're totally right. And it actually starts during the sales process. Because if you think about it, I essentially need three different sales pitches: the athlete pitch, the mom pitch, and the dad pitch. And do not discredit the importance of understanding the difference between pitching dad and pitching mom in the performance training space, because the impetus for those athletes coming through our doors is very different depending on which one we're talking about. And so there is a certain level of kind of instinct that you need in the selling process for communicating with both. Moms tend to gravitate a lot more towards what I'd call injury prevention, and maybe less toward increasing athleticism or performance-based metrics. I very rarely will have a mom come to me and say, exactly how much harder will my kid throw if he trains with you this winter? Whereas dads might come at me with that, and athletes definitively will come at me with that. So I need to understand what's going to motivate them to move, to spend, And when you get into those maybe late high school through college and even professional athlete realms, the spending party changes. You never know. Is it a high school kid who's taken great initiative and picked up a part-time job to pay for his own training? Well, you're selling to him, not his parents. That's a kid whose hard-earned dollars are coming into your operation. If you're talking to a 13-year-old, you don't ask that 13-year-old which package they'd like to purchase. You get dad on the phone, or you get mom on the phone, or you get them in front of you, and you have difficult conversations. I shouldn't say difficult. You have different conversations depending on the person that you're speaking with. And most of our fitness businesses that we interact with, or people that we know in this industry, have one primary sales pitch that they obviously modify based on the moment. But we need kind of a variety of angles to take in our space. And I think that might be a little bit specific to this performance training sector, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes a ton of sense. I'm so glad that you started talking about this when all the way at this kind of sales step, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. I think the relationship building starts at the very first point of contact, which is often in a sales consult setting. And you have to think about, how am I moving them toward a next step? And that depends on who am I talking to. Am I talking to a 13-year-old who gets to make decisions for themselves and just needs to go ask for permission, right? Am I talking to an adult who really brought their kid here and their kid maybe doesn't want to be here, right? So I think you're right that you might need to have different pitches you can pull out of your pocket depending on the context of each of those scenarios. So I think that's really smart. And then talk a little bit about kind of ongoing communication. So that's obviously, how you approach from the sales conversation, but moving forward, what are the kind of communication channels that you find yourself using the most to get a message to a kid or to an adult, or, what are the communication channels you use on a regular basis once they're a member?
Well, when we started this business, I remember I was afraid of difficult conversations, and I wasn't quite as seasoned as I am now, and having been in the room for a number of sales pitches and client onboarding and client relationship maintenance. And one thing that my business partner, Eric, has done since as far back as I can remember, that I remember initially made me really anxious and uncomfortable, and now I get excited to watch it go, is when he sits down in a room with a dad and an athlete, and he very quickly reads the room, because he might look at the athlete and say, "So, Michael, I see you tweaked your back a little while ago, or you were braced at 15 years old. Tell me a little bit about it." And before Michael gets to say anything, dad leans in and starts hammering us with information. And Eric sees that moment, and it's very quick and instinctual that he essentially withdraws the dad for the conversation. And he says, "Look, your feedback's awesome, but I need to hear it from Michael. I need to know how you think about your injury history. I need to see you take ownership of this process." And that starts here in the assessment room. And basically right out of the gate, he communicates in a fairly direct, fairly passive-aggressive way that now that the transaction has happened and we're on board to work with us, it's time to understand how this social dynamic is going to work. And we want to minimize touch points with parents as often as possible. Now, that's not saying that we want to keep parents in the dark. They spend a lot of money for their kids to train with us. But a big part of what we do is teaching these kids how to be respectable young adults. And the interesting reality of parenting is that there's this proximity bias that you can't fully appreciate until you've had a kid and you've said, "Hey, you got to eat your vegetables." And they're like, "Shut up, Dad." But then they walk into our weight room and Josh on the training floor says, "Did you have vegetables at lunch today?" And you say no. Then Josh says, "Well, you need to make a stop on the ride home." And suddenly the kid gets into the car and is like, Dad, we have to stop at Stop and Shop on the way home. I need Brussels sprouts." And he's like, "Are you kidding me? I've been saying this to you for years. And some kid named Josh on the training floor told you need vegetables?" Well, yeah, that's the proximity bias issue we have in place. And I've watched this again and again and again. And I think that what it comes down to is Eric realizes the impact that we have on these kids very early. I mean, pretty much anything we say is treated as gospel to these guys. And he fast tracks us into a point where we can deliver valuable messages to the kids right during that first session in front of dad. And it also teaches the message, Dad, you can't micromanage this. You can't be a helicopter dad right out of the gate. It's important that your kid take ownership of this process. I know that's kind of a lot. And we can go down a lot of rabbit holes with this. We can talk about, who's scheduling your sessions? You're a 16-year-old kid. You own a cell phone. You even drove mom and dad's car over here. Why is mom scheduling your training sessions? It's time to grow up. Put on your big boy pants. Let's do this. These are the things, the conversations that we have to have all the time. And as we have recently transitioned to a new CRM and a new scheduling software, we're having this conversation constantly. My office manager and I, who's getting that invitation link to sign up for the new platform? Is it mom? Is it the athlete? It's been a really valuable opportunity for us to extract parents from the situation, because when we know who the kind of repeat offenders are, the kids who just aren't owning the process. They let their parents do everything for them. This transition's been this like wonderful opportunity to strong arm them into doing some of this stuff themselves. And so we will, go so far as to be like, give me your cell phone at the front desk. I'm going to get you set up with the new scheduling software. You can book your sessions from here on out. And it sounds like we're like maniacal about taking control of these people's worlds. But the most valuable thing we do for our athletes is teach them how to act like adults.
Yeah. Well, I think what's so great about what you're sharing here is that you recognize the outsized impact that you have on these young folks, and you're trying to use your powers for good, right? Trying to get them to have more integrity and to stay accountable and do the things they say they're going to do and take care of their bodies and build good habits. And just like anyone would that has that kind of impact on young people, like teachers, it seems like you take it really seriously. And so much of what you're sharing here, and this gets to the point about communication that I asked, is it's about expectation setting from the really beginning. From the very beginning of the relationship, help setting the tone for how you want to communicate with them, and that you want them to take responsibility for their experience inside and out of the gym. From not only showing up on time and booking their own sessions, but then showing up with a great attitude in the gym. So I think that's huge. The one thing I also hear a lot when it comes to communication with kids and adults is in some cases, there's gyms that I'm talking to where they use the kids to get access to the parents, because they sell also adult training, or they use the parents to get access to the kids. And so talk me through that. Do you all ever, have your youth athletes come in, and then you also have the parents coming in like, hey, parents, do you need a gym too? Or vice versa. You got adults coming in, you're like, hey, do you have any kids that play sports? So how are you doing that dance with your clients?
So it's far more frequently the former scenario, kids turning into Gen Pop business with their extended family. And that cycles back to an important lesson for me that was, it would be a good idea to have something to sell to everyone. And what we realized was, initially we had a significant chunk of the day that we just plain weren't using. We're paying rent on a space for 24 hours a day, but our clientele were high school, college, and professional athletes who didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. It just wasn't their thing. So we weren't really opening the weight room until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, but it sat there vacant, waiting to be monetized in other capacities. And so it just made sense for us to eventually start some sort of adult training dynamic. And it made even more sense to just go right to the contact list we already had. With hundreds of active clients, all of which have at least one parent, or I should say, God willing, all of them do. We have this,
hopefully most of which,
large, exactly. We have this large list of pre-qualified leads to work off of. But we looked at it initially as a pretty decent chunk of our clients are under the age of 16. They can't get themselves to the gym. We've created a comfortable waiting area for parents to work. We've got a conference table. The Wi-Fi code is published for them. They can do work there if they want. They can watch Netflix if they want. They could read the paper. Which is funny. My people don't read the paper anymore, and there was someone sitting reading the Wall Street Journal in my office the other day, and I brought my son in because it was April vacation, and he's like, "Dad, what the heck is that guy doing?" my
It's so
8-year-old didn't
mysterious.
understand. He's like, "Look at the size of the book that guy's holding." Like, that's an aside. But we have all
Making me
these
feel
people.
so old. I love it. Yeah.
I know. Well, my son did that for me. He made me feel terribly old. But it brings me just basically to the point that we've created this environment where we facilitate loitering, and we never asked these people in the early stages of our business, since you're here, you interested in stepping out there? And we did run into common pushback, and it had very little to do with money or credibility on our part. They had already demonstrated, if you trust us with your kids' health and safety, you sure as hell will trust us with your own. But the most common piece of feedback I get, and I would imagine most performance gym owners would get in this scenario or dynamic, is this is my son's safe space. And I don't know how psyched my son or daughter would be if I stepped into a environment that they feel like is their own. Would they be embarrassed that I was out here? Would they feel like they had to train with me? And that pushback is well received. I get it, especially as I've seen literally thousands of teenagers come through my space and understand a lot of the insecurities they have. But in our space, the reality is it's just too big to think that way. I've got 12,000 square feet of gym space. I've got anywhere from 3 to 10 coaches on the training floor at any given time. It's kind of nonsense to think that a single individual shouldn't be in that 12,000 square foot room because there's a kid 150 feet away doing their foam rolling who's concerned about it, because no one in the gym knows whose parent is who. And we create a dynamic where the kids and parents shouldn't really feel compelled to overlap or interact if they don't want to. So we get over that hurdle pretty quickly, but it's a common one. It's upwards of 50% of the time when I put this idea onto the radar of a parent, that's the first thing they say to me. But it's not a very difficult one to get past, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, I want to call out a phrase you used there, what I think is a really great kind of takeaway for our listeners, which I think you said you try to do a really good job of facilitating loitering. Right. And like, I think if any of our listeners like work with youth athletes and also have an adult program, and you're not facilitating the loitering of those parents, that's a really great first step. And I just love that idea. It's like, I want to make it really easy for you to hang out here, feel like you're welcome here, feel comfortably here, get to know the team a little bit. So that if their day does come by where I say, hey, do you have a gym nearby that you like going to? Do you ever want to give this a try? Right? That they already feel like it's a second home. They already feel like they know the people. They feel welcomed. I think that's so smart. But I also like the thing you said earlier, which is you already have this list of athletes. The parents on that list are such low-hanging fruit. And the same thing, if the reverse is true for our listeners, if you have this list of adults and you want to expand your kids program, you already have all these people who probably have some kids, right? It's such low-hanging fruit that if you're not, I don't want to use the word exploiting, but if you're not taking advantage of, if you're not leveraging those relationships to get the kids, if you have the adults and vice versa, then that's a really great, it's a really great strategy to pour some gasoline on if you're not. What else for you? What else for you really matters when it comes to balancing these relationships you have with adults in your space and young folks?
Well, before I jump to that, I just want to emphasize one thing you just said, which is you've got adults who have kids. And that's probably the more common scenario, say, for this audience who are saying, well, maybe we want to open up some sports performance, or maybe we want to cater to some team training. In order to be half decent at this job, and this job being coaching, being an instructor of fitness, you need to be a good conversationalist. And in order to run a really healthy, successful operation in this space, you need to know what's going on in their world outside of the gym. You need to take good notes. You need to have a good CRM. You need to understand that, I don't know, Andrew and Michael have a pet that they adopted recently, and that got written down, and you talk about it, and you revisit these things, whatever it is. And you shouldn't... If you're going to your clients and being at this point, you've concluded, I want to open a performance training program in my space, and Peter and Michael said that all my clients have kids. If you're hearing that and you're walking up to clients and being like, hey, I never asked, you got any kids? You're doing your job wrong. You've been doing your job wrong. You didn't deserve that business in the first place, or at least you didn't deserve to retain it beyond month number 1. And so this isn't just low-hanging fruit. This is like fruit that's just on the ground already. You just got to pick it up because you should know the names, ages, and interest of the children of the people that you see on a semi-regular basis if you're doing a good job. I know that's a little bit pushy, but it's the easiest way to retain business, to give a shit.
I give it a thumbs up. 100%. I think you're so right. That if you're not already knowing about who your other family members, especially the kids, if you're not knowing the parents that are dropping them off, or you're not knowing parents that have children in your area that play sports, then like, how are your relationship building if you don't know some of these fundamentals? So yeah,
exactly.
I give that a big thumbs up. So yeah, keep on going, my friend.
I want to build one more thought off of another thought you had relating to this facilitating loitering. And one of the most valuable things we do, and I believe we do it unintentionally, is we showcase our authenticity in that environment in the presence of those parents. So I put this conference table that seats anywhere from 4 to 6 in a pretty visible, comfortable spot in the office. And I said, this is where kids are going to be able to do their homework if they're waiting for a ride home, and where parents can fire up an iPad and do a little bit of work or open up a laptop if they need to while they wait, excuse me, on their child's training session to wrap. And what ended up happening, not necessarily in a bad way, is that my team started to gravitate toward that table. Even though they all have desks in the staff lounge and they have their own personal space, they're social people. That's part of the reason we hired them. And suddenly lunch is happening at that table, or an afternoon snack during a break is happening at that table, and there might be a parent sitting there, or there might be a parent 8 or 10 feet away on the couches. And what I love is that my team doesn't filter who they are and how they interact in front of those people in that environment. And on Monday afternoons, I run the desk for a few hours, the front desk. I greet clients, talk to parents. It helps me stay a little bit in touch with what's going on around the gym. I'm not in my office with the door closed. And I watch this dynamic, and I can't tell you how often I see parents out of the corner of my eye smirking and just listening to the way that we interact as a team, listening to us bust balls, listening to us joke about the training environment, joke about clients, give clients a hard time at the front desk, give each other a hard time, and they eat it up. And those are the people who will say to me, I just love the environment in here. It makes me feel young. I like to hang out in this environment. You guys make me laugh every time I come in. And that's my opening, where I say, you like this? You should see what the training floor is like. I want to walk you through there and help you realize that you should be training when you come in here, not sitting at the desk or sitting at this table near the front desk. Because if some of this is good to you, wait till you experience more. And it's like free money as far as convincing those people who bother to mention that to me. And those people, they eat it up. And my team, thankfully, they don't try and be some different version of themselves in that space. And I don't know if they even realize they do it. I don't know if they realize how valuable it is. But I think it puts parents at ease when they see that we like our job and we like each other. And it's just a little bit of a game changer that I didn't really put my finger on until now.
Yeah. What a great example, Pete. I think that it's so huge because one of the things I know listeners have probably heard Mark and I mention a lot on this podcast is when we talk about creating community, we talk about creating culture in our organizations, we're often known for saying that you really can't directly create any of those things. You can't directly really make a culture a specific thing. You can't directly make people join and into a community. But what we can do as leaders of our organizations is make space where that's possible. Right? We can curate physical spaces, in this case, as your example, where it is possible for people to interact and mingle and coexist in new and different ways. right? And I think the thing that we often miss the opportunities to do in our organizations, especially gyms, is to create interactions outside of the workout, to create interactions outside of the training floor. And what you're doing here is you're giving all of the people who are in that waiting room a chance to glimpse behind the scenes, to see how all of you as a team interact. You're seeing how they, as family members, interact, how they sit and help their youngest child do their homework or what they're having for lunch. And all those interactions, they build rapport. They build trust. They build connection. And that's what building community looks like. That's what a culture is made up of, those moments of connection. And you can't do it directly. You could just kind of create the space for it, kind of like a garden, right? And then tend to it. And what a beautiful example. And you're right that translates to dollars. Right, that's not just like some woo-woo crap that we do because we say we care about culture, right? Fanning the flames of that kind of connection amongst your people, right? That translates to loyalty. It translates to people staying longer, spending more, talking about you to their friends. So there is a real bottom line impact to this kind of effort. And so I love that example so much. Let's do this. I know we got to wrap things up because also you and I have a meeting to get to, but let's do this in the interest of wrapping up this topic. If there's anyone listening who's like, yeah, I'm working with young youth athletes and adults, and I know I need to improve, where do they start? What's the first thing you would say to go focus on if they want to improve the way that they communicate with adults and youth athletes in their spaces? Of all the things you mentioned today, where should they begin?
That's a good question that I've never been asked. I would say I'd start with a conversation as a team about where we see the biggest opportunities for interaction with parents, where we might be underserving that community, where we might be under communicating, where we might be over communicating. I think that my advice here is know that you as the owner, sure, you know more about your operation than anyone, but your team that are in the trenches on the training floor with the athletes have a interpretation of the operation that you don't have because they're doing the nitty gritty work. And that's where some of the best feedback has come from me when they say, I really wish we could get so-and-so to handle his own scheduling. I'm tired of the late cancellations. Or I really wish that we could interact directly with the parents on this thing because the kids aren't communicating clearly. Like, for example, we have a lot of injury scenarios come through. And there are some parents who have great social awareness in saying to themselves, hey, I don't want people to feel like I'm overstepping and constantly in their space, but I got to know what's going on. My kid's coming off of an ACL reconstruction or something like that. And we see there are times where the athlete is under communicating with the parent, even though we're delivering comprehensive information. So I guess my best piece of advice is to crowdsource this information from your team about where you think your strengths lie and where your weaknesses are as far as the communication patterns and whether you're overweighting interaction with anyone or underweighting, be it parents versus athletes. And this hasn't even begun the discussion of talking to coaches at the high school and collegiate level because they're often involved in the decision making and influencing the directions these athletes go with how they use their off seasons and their free time and stuff like that. Another conversation for another day. But the short answer to your question is start with a team meeting where you discuss your strengths and weaknesses as it relates to communicating with athletes and parents.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think, we'll have to have you come back and continue this conversation. I feel like there's so much more for us to dive into. But I think as a first step for listeners and viewers is that if this is an environment that you have kids and parents in, I think Pete's advice here is so solid, which is go talk about where are the opportunities? Where are the opportunities for us to engage more with the kids or with the parents? Where are our strengths? Where are, our gaps? And how do we fill them in? I think that's a great place to start. And then, we'll promise to come back and continue this conversation. I think there's more to be said about other channels of communication and how to leverage those relationships long term. But yeah, thanks so much for this conversation, my friend. It was fantastic. Listeners, I hope you took some notes. There were some real gems in here. So thanks, Pete. Let's see them again on the next one.
Yeah, I'd say to the audience, as I mentioned at the start of this one, this isn't a question I've been asked, but I'd imagine the conversation will provoke a series of follow-up questions, and we love engagement in that sense. I'd be thrilled to record podcasts based on follow-up questions relating to this athlete parent business dynamic, because sometimes we don't know the questions, but we do know the answers.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. So, shoot us email, pete@businessforunicorns.com, michael@businessforunicorns.com. Ask some follow-up questions to this. Tell us other topics you want us to discuss. We literally use your feedback to figure out what the heck we're talking about in these podcasts. So if something's valuable to you and we haven't talked about it yet, or you want more of something else, please let us know, because we're here for you, my friends. Well, thanks again, Pete. You all have a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Take care.
Well, I hope you loved today's podcast, and forgive me, I want to remind you one more time, if you haven't already done so, head over to businessofunicorns.com, click the button, and get your free self-assessment, the ultimate training gym owner report card. I promise you're going to want to dig into this resource and get the support you need, finding crystal clarity on exactly where you need to be focusing to create a life and a business you love.